Welcome to the official audiobook of my book. You will hear background sounds and you will deal with it. Okay. Written for my friends who have always respected and understood me. Dedicated to everyone but my parents who probably never will. The only good thing I retained from my mother was my love of coffee. When I was very young, I wanted a dog, but I wasn't allowed one because we were a cat family who had several cats. I already messed it up. You're going to deal with the mess-ups. Since I couldn't get a real dog, I made one up in the form of an imaginary friend. A pale golden doodle named Molly. I kept her in my heart and grew her a summer forest full of sticks to chew, fruit to eat, and warm wind to run in. I wasn't a very emotional child, but she was an extremely emotional dog. Even though I knew mad, I knew happy, and I knew sad, I never felt them like Molly did. Fuck! I've messed it up like 5 times. We're starting over. Hold on. When I was very young, I wanted a dog, but I wasn't allowed one because we were a cat family who already had several cats. Since I couldn't get a real dog, I made one up in the form of an imaginary friend. A pale golden doodle named Molly. I kept her in my heart and grew her a summer forest full of sticks to chew, fruit to eat, and warm wind to run in. I wasn't a very emotional child, but she was an extremely emotional dog. Even though I knew mad, I knew happy, and I knew sad, I never felt them like everyone else. Molly did. Always expressing the right feelings over the right things at the right times. She knew exactly when to be excited and when to be worried, so I copied her expressions until my feelings were just like hers. When Molly was happy, I acted happy, and when she was sad, I cried too, even though she didn't want me to. The more I mimicked, the more people noticed me. Instead of ignoring me like usual, they came to me, knelt down to me, listened to me, wanted me. When I acted like Molly, I could act like everyone else, so everyone else could understand me. I was invisible before Molly. She was the best dog in the world, but I still had days she couldn't help me through. Bad days were cold, the worst of them pushing snowy storms through her summer forest, the chill within making me shiver no matter how many blankets I wrapped myself into. I'd often sneak Mom's hot coffee and sit in front of the biggest window, a herd of cats huddled around and on me, their warm, heavy bodies melting some of Molly's ice. On bad days, my mom and dad... Fuck! Why can't... I'm gonna have to start this bitch over again, aren't I? Man, fuck this shit. Hold on. When I was very young, I wanted a dog. No, I'm just playing. On bad days, my mom and dad fought so aggressively I felt in danger during arguments, especially when they were about me, which they usually were. Folding myself into the bathtub to stay as out of their way as I could, I perpetually rememorized the changing patterns of residue, focusing on the warm water drizzling onto my face, focusing on the whistling faucet, focusing on the gurgling drain, the cold porcelain, the cooling droplets, the itchiness of my eye when water got past my lashes. I hoped the warm stream would thaw Molly's trees or melt the pelting hail. But despite the dreary storms and swirling winter, Molly worked hard to be cheerful company. Molly was the best dog in the world, and she loved me. More than my family, more than my teachers, more than my other imaginary friends, Molly loved me. I know she loved me. But it got worse. It got worse as Dad stopped coming home some nights, then more nights, then most nights, then ever. I asked Mom where he was, and she'd answer, "If I could, I'd leave your retarded ass too." The way she looked at me that day terrified Molly, who ran into her forest to dig a big hole in the dirt. I could feel her frantic paws tearing through the frozen mud, ripping out roots and kicking back rocks, making enough room to duck herself into the narrow pit. Wide, watery eyes staring out into the snowy forest, she trembled, freezing rain pooling into her little tub. She focused on the cold, the sting of ice clinging to her curls, the prickling of her paws shaking under her freezing belly. It soothed her. The numbness, the pain. It made it easier to cope, but while she was like that, I didn't know how to act or feel, left alone with my wrong, abnormal emotions. Even so, I didn't stop her, because her comfort was important, and my problems kept getting worse. They got worse as kids at school noticed I was different, while adults realized I wasn't maturing properly. The same year I was placed in special education, Mom lost access to Dad's bank account, leading her to sell most of our cats and move to a cheaper neighborhood where she picked up heavy drinking. The new school kids were meaner, adults were passive, and Molly was so intimidated by my problems she hid in her hole more and more often. I eventually got used to feeling her warm weight in the pit of my chest. her deep, raspy breathing as she tried to remain awake, remain calm. Her scraggly fur struggling to thicken in the weather, unable to stay on her frostbitten skin, pale clumps bobbing around her patchy, graying body. On nights she felt the guiltiest, she'd climb up in bed with me, clustered icicles lumping her fur, sopping my blankets and pajamas in freezing water. Placing a hand on her balding, rubbery head, her thin curls squelched beneath my pet's. Shivering, I never complained because she didn't ask to be made. It wasn't her fault she needed the cold, and after all she'd done for me, she deserved to keep it. Even though the pain of slowly killing her outweighed the pain I might have felt if she hadn't been there at all. If I'd gone numb alone, I would have gotten used to the cold without dragging her into it. It felt like I built her just to break her down, created her just to watch her suffer, and because I did that, I had an obligation to stand by her more than she did to stand by me. So I'd reach inside my forest to be with her as much as I could, focusing my senses to the pit in my chest. Ignoring the cold, the snow, the ice. Ignoring classmates, teachers, and tutors. Ignoring my mom, my dad's absence, and all the cats I never got to say goodbye to, so I could focus on Molly. Until one day, I felt nothing. Nothing but ice, blackened water, and floating fur. She'd ran away, taking all the warmth I'd ever known with her, leaving me a sunflower, half frozen on the water's surface, sailing from one rocky wall to another. I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry in the wake of her absence and in honor of her memory, but I couldn't remember how. She wasn't there to show me how to cry. Walking over to the pit in my chest, I listened to the wind sloshing the twigs and watery mud. Stepping in, I lowered myself into the agonizing bath, water cutting my flesh like jagged teeth. Reaching out over the surface, I felt around clumps of ice and waterlogged leaves for a tuft of her fur. Grasping a chunk of stringy curls, I wrapped myself around the soft memory of her. Pressing it to my chest under water, I rested my head at the bottom of the tub, cold water trickling onto my face, and thought about how I thought it had felt to cry with Molly. Woo! All right, let's go.